to the Real Men of Real Estate here on KCAA Radio. You can find us at 1050 AM or 106.5 FM on your dial. I've got the pleasure of speaking with Gabe here about Delaware Statutory Trusts, kind of an extension of the 1031 exchange process. So we've gotten through a lot of the nitty gritty about how to do this. I sure hope folks can see exactly how this would benefit them and what they can get out of it. So thank you very much, Gabe.
My pleasure.
And so can you run us through some examples, maybe kind of a start to finish, how this looks like when somebody actually goes through it?
Sure, absolutely.
All right.
So I've got a great example. I'm working with a client right now who is, just sold a property that's been in their family for decades, actually.
Okay. What sort of property is it?
It was an industrial property.
Okay.
Probably wasn't performing all that great, but the value was fantastic because it was in a great location. So typical scenario for me where I do these ROE calculations with people, return on equity. And people will tell me, they'll say, oh, my return, it's been fantastic. I've doubled, tripled, made 10 times on my money and I'm getting 20% on what I invested, everything. I stop them there. I say, listen, that's great, but let's talk about return on equity. Well, what do you mean by that? Let's talk about what you're getting on a net basis in terms of net income from the property. That's the number at the end of the year after all expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance. What is that number at the end of the year, the one you put on your taxes, and divide that by the value of the real estate. Okay. So talk to your real estate broker or whoever, people are calling you probably all the time and saying, hey, I'll pay you X amount. Whatever that value is, you divide the net income divided by the value. That's your return on equity. And most often, at least in my part of the country, those return on equity numbers are between 1% and 3%.
Oh.
And so,
oh wow.
If I can get, let's say, 4 to 6% with a batch of DSTs,
I just doubled or tripled their return.
I just doubled or tripled their cash flow.
Wow,
and the cash flow is typically the most important part for these clients. So that's the part where I'll first start the conversation, obviously. And hey, what are you guys doing? What are we trying to accomplish here? So that client was very determined to find his own piece of real estate. He wanted to kick the dirt. I totally get it. A lot of my clients are that way. He's going out to Arizona. He found a property. His exchange, by the way, he sold a property for $3.6 million. Okay. He had about
so this is a big one.
That's in California. That's a decent sized one.
Fair enough.
So in terms of investment real estate, we're talking about industrial and multifamily. That's a typical number, I would say. And so 3.6 million, he's got about $500,000 in debt on the property. Okay. So most of it's equity and he would get hammered by taxes if he sold. So he went out and found a property in Arizona. The property was worth 1.8 million. He's in escrow right now. And he's going to be, looking to figure out what to do with the rest of that equity. He's got another 1.8 in equity. And we're getting close to the end of the timeline here. So he needs to find replacement property for the rest.
So he's on that 45-day clock.
So he's on that 45-day clock.
Okay.
Exactly. So just today I put together a batch of about 2 scenarios. One was a scenario that, hey, let's just fill up the rest of the equity with DSTs. I think I did about 4 or 6 different DSTs for that. I did a second scenario using the 200% rule where I filled up the entire amount in case something goes wrong with this property in Arizona. If all of a sudden, if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, he's going to have a backup for the entire amount. And that's going to be really important. And by the way, he's buying the property in Arizona all cash. So he needs to replace that 500,000. He doesn't want to go to a bank right now and try to replace that 500,000. That's 6 or 7% investment rates right now. We already have leveraged DSTs. So we have leveraged DSTs that are going to be able to pick up that 500,000 in debt pretty easily.
Got it.
So that's a fun one that I'm working on right now. And it gets even more deep into it. He says, well, Gabe, I'm looking for some liquidity. I want to have some options where I might get some money here in the next few years to, redo my house or be able to, work on some stuff. I said, well, hey, let's check out this 721 UPREIT. Okay. There's all these different terminologies in this business. Okay. Basically what it is I was talking about all these sponsors that have REITs and they have different DSTs. Well, some of these options, they made an arrangement where the REIT is going to buy the DST in the
Oh,
next 2 to 3
fascinating.
years. And so what happens in that
Okay.
scenario is that your interest in the DST gets converted into shares of the REIT. And what's important about to know about that is that now you have liquidity. And so you can peel off as
Mhm.
much as you or as more as you want. So he can sell $50,000 if he wants. He can sell 500,000 if he wants. So that kind of is another element
Yeah, that's
of
pretty
that, which
neat,
kind of gets
actually.
really fun in that whole aspect.
Holy cow. So for this particular guy, what comes next then?
Oh, so we're in the process of identifying all of them. So I need to go to all the sponsors and get the correct allocations for debt and equity, and then
Hmm.
we put together a whole addendum for his identification that gets submitted to the QI. It's qualified intermediary. They're the ones that hold that money. They're in the exchange,
Okay.
and they validate with the IRS of getting all of the identifications in by 45 days. And so we're a part of that process where we help prepare that documentation.
All right. How much time does that intermediary need to do their work? Like you're pushing these 45 days, but something tells me there's a few other things that are process oriented you got to get done.
For them, not much. They just need what I need. They need what I give them by midnight on the 45th day. So it's an email
Oh, okay.
documentation that we prepared with the
Mhm.
client, and then as long as that was submitted by the 45th day, then that's everything. Their job is done. The next portion is to actually fund and execute on these DSTs. That whole process takes about 3 to 4 days. It's a very simple
Okay,
process.
so it goes pretty fast. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a matter of filling out some documentation, setting up wiring instructions, and then a closing.
Okay. And there's usually those don't fill up. I'm assuming like you buy once you tell them you're going to buy something, you kind of have a place held for you, or is there a little bit of horse trading sort of thing that can happen there at the last second
That's
where you
actually a
got to?
very good question. So no, they do fill up, and some of
Okay.
them fill up faster than others. In fact, if someone is telling me, well, let's see if I'm going to wait a month for this other deal to go through before I do a DST, I'll say, well, we have to choose the right one because there's some that are going to be closed up here pretty soon, and I'd hate for you to have an option that you identify
Mhm.
that's not there anymore. So the
Okay.
good news is that we have a great relationship with a lot of these sponsors, and we get two things. One, we get equity blocks right off the bat. They'll give Perch Wealth a number of equity blocks in terms of these offerings. Secondarily, I'll go ahead and make a equity reservation for my client specifically. So I'll call the sponsor and I'll say, you know what, let's block off 500,000 in this DST for this client, and they can typically hold on to that reservation. It's non-binding, and they can hold on to it for about 1 to 2 weeks.
Hmm. How often, or excuse me, how long are these offerings open typically? It sounds like some of them are going to move in a week or two.
Yeah, some of them in a few days actually.
Oh man, wow.
And we're talking about lots of money. We're talking about 20 or 30 million gone within a week. So that can be that can happen, of course, but it depends on a lot of factors. Some of them is just the size of the offering. Some of the size of the offerings are in the hundreds of millions, and so that's going to take a while to fill up. And the other ones is just how the strength of the offering. If the strength of the offering is great, then they're going to go quickly.
Okay, wow. All right. And do you have a sense of the speed? I mean, generally going in, like, or sometimes you're going to
Yeah.
do the
So with the first
200%
question,
rule because you don't know.
first question I'll ask the sponsors how much equity is left.
Uh-huh.
So if it's a $30 million offering and they tell me 15 million's left, I'll say, okay, then we're probably good for a few weeks.
I got you.
If they say it's a few million left, that can be gone within a couple of days, easily.
Wow. Okay. So just basically you only need one or two folks doing an exchange like you would have to fill it
If it's
up.
less than a million, I say it can be gone by the end of the day.
Oh man,
Certainly.
literally.
Yeah,
That seems kind of amazing to move that quickly on something. I mean, in real estate, were you very accustomed to we'll start the paperwork, I'll call you next week,
sure.
right? And
It's a
we'll go
different
to the next
process.
step. Yeah, wow. Okay.
The good
So,
news is though there's usually another one around the corner. So um, it's not like we're missing out on too much unless you identify and then it's
mhm.
gone. So that's the part where I strategize with the client on making sure that doesn't happen.
Got it. What can the client do then at that point to just make sure that they're prepared? I mean, it sounds like you're taking care of everything for them at this point, and they don't have a lot to do. So are there roadblocks, or excuse me, not roadblocks, but speed bumps at that point they need to do something about?
No, the client most importantly has to review the information. Of course,
Uh-huh.
I'm discussing that with them. We're working on that together.
Of course.
But they do need to review the information. And by information, what's nice about DSTs is that, yes, you can move quickly on them. And the reason you can is because all the work has been done. The property's already been
Mhm.
purchased. There's already an appraisal on the property. There's all the pro forma on the rent roll, et cetera. All that information is in what's called a PPM, private placement memorandum. And some of them could be in the hundreds of pages. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it's important to review that information and then obviously make a decision on whether you want to move forward or not. So that's
Mhm.
the client has to be uh, doing all of that as well. And so other than that, we do try to pick up most of the slack. It's a very stressful process for most of my clients. So I try to pick up as much as I can.
Right. Make sure it gets done for them on time. Yeah.
Right.
All right. And so if, let's just say, going for three different DSTs, they fill up and you've already identified them, so you're allowed to substitute at that point. Is that
No.
no? Okay, so
No.
that's the end of the
Once you
road.
identify, you identify. Now, the reality of what you just said is probably very low because if you're working with me, I'd probably make sure that doesn't happen.
Got it. Okay. Well, that sounds pretty critical. All right. I appreciate the 200% rule quite a bit more now.
Yeah, no, it
That,
does help to have more options
mhm.
because the 200% rule will allow you to um, do quite a few backups.
All right. Wow. That's pretty fascinating. Well, we're gonna have to take another commercial break here. That went fast. That did not seem like
It sure did.
an entire segment, but absolutely fascinating how these things get structured and how they go. I hope this current one finishes up smooth for you.
Thank you. I think you
All
will.
right. So thanks for listening here, folks, at KCAA Radio. This is the Real Men of Real Estate every third Sunday, 1 p.m. I'm your host, Dan Redig here. So thanks for listening, and we'll be right back after these messages.